Hello, dear readers. Today S will summarize the first part of the story, The Real Dragon Magician. A piercing scream echoed. Russell Raymond appeared before the bustling city gates. The gatekeepers were blocking a man. One of them held up the man's ID card and glanced at it, then looked back at his face with a slightly hesitant gaze. Raymond. The guard's mind grew restless. Wasn't he from the nation-building Raymond family? The man's face was covered in dirt, and his eyes burned a fierce red. He was none other than the protagonist, Russell Raymond, a nobleman. The guards looked him up and down, tattered clothing, dusty skin, and bandages still wrapped around his arm. And yet, despite everything, his towering physique and noble aura remained undeniable. No matter what he wore, there was a rare beauty that shone through. Why is he dressed like that? Unable to delay him any longer, the two guards handed back his card. You're clear. Go ahead. One guard turned to the other. Hey, you know that guy. Yeah, he's from the Raymond clan, the nation-building family. The first guard looked shocked. What? Then why does he look like that? They began whispering behind his back. A noble dressed like that, guess the Raymond family isn't all that impressive after all. Yeah, I heard the White Tower is recruiting mercenaries. Maybe he's here for that. No way he can't be that poor. A noble becoming a mercenary. Russell's expression turned icy at the gossip. He scoffed and disappeared into a quiet alley. So nosy, these bastards. He had entered Camelot the capital, a place of majestic simplicity, peaceful and elegant in design. He walked slowly, blending into the crowd. Before him stood a towering spire, the magic tower where the kingdom's most elite guards assembled. His thoughts drifted to a darker past. He had once worked tirelessly to enter this very place, to save his collapsing family. On the battlefield, smoke and enemies filled every corner. His father's enemies, and the one who betrayed his father from behind. After his father died in a battle against the Empire, he and the others had to evacuate the castle. We ran. I had no choice but to enter the magic tower to reclaim my family's land. Back then, he was just a naive boy crying as he left, yet his eyes still followed the noble figure of his mother. Mother. Around his neck glimmered a small pendant. He cried out, desperate and clinging, No. My mother is still. But that was just a foolish dream. Inside the tower stood 3 great chairs reserved for the most powerful mages in the kingdom. Russell now stood before them. I was expelled from the academy even before I could officially apply to the magic tower. A loud announcement rang out, making his entire body tremble. Russell Raymond. The examiner spoke coldly. You've failed 3 subjects. This has never happened before in the history of the academy. The examiner continued, his words drenched in contempt. You might excel at theory, but you'll never reach the 2nd mana ring. Another person chimed in. You won't be able to withstand mana compression. Why not choose a path other than that of a mage? Every word struck Russell like a dagger to the heart. Compressed mana. Narrow, weak, incapable of absorbing or releasing enough mana was the cruelest fate a mage could face. Sitting in a corner, his thoughts drifted back to that dark past. And yet, through a twist of fate during his days as a mercenary, he had truly reached the 2nd mana ring. Russell looked down at his hands. But I'm still nothing more than a 3rd-rate mage. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed within the tower. A staff member emerged and announced, The temporary job registration for today has ended. Please come back tomorrow. A wave of frustration erupted from the crowd waiting outside. We waited all day. What do you expect us to do now? Russell listened quietly to their complaints, demanding nothing for himself. People began dispersing. I heard the museum is hiring temporary mages. Want to give it a try. Are you serious? He listened to the gossip from where he sat, knowing they were only looking for 1st-ring mages to clean up. Outside the tower, the scorching sunlight glared down, accompanied by voices full of resignation. Coming here was just asking for humiliation. In that shadowed corner, Russell sat alone, silently observing the scene. His eyes reflected a quiet helplessness as he chuckled to himself. Then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a coin pouch. Inside was a single shining gold coin. That was when he made a decision. Then I'll go. His destination was the Grand Louvre Museum. As the group entered the museum, guide led them through while explaining, This is the largest museum in the kingdom. You are standing in the Great Hall of the Louvre Museum. We're expecting nobles to visit this week, so everything must be spotless. Russell stood quietly at the side, listening to the duties assigned. The guide gave instructions carefully, almost anxiously. Please be cautious when using wind magic to clean. If anything is damaged. His expression darkened and his tone dropped low. Be prepared to face the consequences. Russell glanced around at the surrounding artifacts and thought to himself, these are all fakes. Why are they so heavily guarded? He silently followed the guide step by step, until something suddenly caught his attention. He stopped in front of a room and looked up. This place, it feels familiar. The sign read Mystical Creatures Room. Russell muttered the name under his breath, standing in hesitation before the door, unsure if he should enter. Just then, something strange stirred in his pocket. The object his mother had given him as a child began to tremble violently. Alarmed, he quickly pulled it out. Why is it suddenly shaking like this? In his hand, it was his mother's ring. It quivered wildly in his palm. Mom's ring. A strange aura seemed to fill the room, causing Russell to glance up once more, hesitant and uneasy. Despite his reluctance, his legs moved on their own, as if fate was pulling him forward. He entered the Mystical Creatures Room, unable to resist the pull. Meanwhile, the museum guide looked around in confusion. We're missing someone. Russell Raymond. The guide searched anxiously, unaware that Russell had ventured deeper into the room and was now standing before a massive skeletal structure. The ring trembled harder than ever in his hand, and he could sense a strange frequency. Mother, is there something you're trying to tell me? Please, speak to me. His eyelids grew heavy, closing involuntarily. Within the ring's internal space, memories surfaced, memories of his childhood, when he and his mother had once visited this very room. Back then, he was just a cheerful, playful boy. That boy had once noticed something within the exhibit and tugged at his mother's hand, pointing toward a narrow secret path. Suddenly, Russell snapped back to the present, eyes wide, and followed the memory's lead. Before him rested the heart of an ancient dragon. The dragon's heart and the ring in his hand seemed connected. Slowly, he raised the ring. Its shape resembled a dragon's eye. Hesitant and confused, Russell slipped the ring onto his finger. Why was Mom crying? Why did she bring me here? His arm dropped limply as the ring stopped trembling. A primordial dragon's heart, a massive skeleton. What was the connection between them? Russell stood still, silent, then suddenly let out a bitter laugh. Maybe I'm just imagining things. His gaze fell back to the ring, and at that very moment, a bizarre phenomenon occurred. The ring emitted flashes of blinding lightning. A voice echoed, the heart and the eye have converged. Open new eyes. You are worthy of becoming a new legend. I will grant you another chance. That's when Russell realized the wheel of fate had shattered and the life he longed for had finally begun. A system prompt appeared. Divine Dragon Eye is scanning the world's data, activating status and quest windows for the chosen one, Russell Raymond. Then came a faint, distant voice calling his name, Raymond. Raymond. He blinked in confusion. What's this sound? It sounds angry, but familiar. Whose voice is this? His eyelids slowly opened, revealing a familiar scene. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his days as a student, right in the middle of a class. The professor slammed a book down on his head, jolting him upright. Yes, he stammered. The professor roared in anger. I don't care if your scores are high. How dare you sleep in my class? You've got guts. Dazed and half asleep, Russell looked up, stunned to see the man before him. Professor Hubert. He glanced sideways at a classmate, but that person had already died long ago. The classmate looked back at him, confused. What's wrong with him? All around, his classmates sneered and snickered at him. What is this? Everything became foggy. Russell raised his hands to pat his face lightly, trying to grasp reality. His lips trembled as he whispered, slowly accepting the truth around him. Have I returned to the past? Harsh sunlight streamed through the classroom windows as he stood there, dazed. Across from him was the same teacher he had once known. But, am I still dreaming? Have I really gone back in time? Professor Hubert stared at him silently, then pressed 2 fingers against Russell's forehead. You don't seem like yourself, but you're still getting punished. Get out. Having just woken up and still confused, Russell was suddenly sent out of the class. He walked down a familiar path. His journey through time had begun. When another eye opens, you will be the foundation for a new myth, so prove yourself worthy. For the future of the new myth, I grant you one more chance. Then he understood and affirmed it. Yes, they really did. But then he suddenly realized the familiar ring on his finger had vanished. When another eye opens, you will be the foundation for a new myth. So prove yourself worthy. For the future of the new myth, I grant you one more chance. Then he understood and affirmed it. Yes, they really did. But then he suddenly realized that the familiar ring on his finger had vanished, and wondering if this was truly another chance. Just as he was still standing in a daze staring at the ring, and Professor Hubert opened the door and stepped out. Was it my mother who helped me? Russell thought. Without waiting to speak further, he bowed his head and quietly accepted his mistake. Sleeping in the middle of class. That's not like you at all. I'm sorry, sir, Russell murmured. Seems like we need a private talk. Come to my office during lunch break. Understood. As he walked away, leaving Russell still bowing respectfully, the professor added, I'll be waiting for you. Watching the familiar figure disappear down the hallway, Russell couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth. How long has it been since I last got into trouble at school? But this feeling, it's kind of nice. As he stood there reflecting, a loud voice suddenly rang out. Hey, so the guy who used to bully me is back, huh? A strong shove hit him in the neck. Russell turned around, visibly annoyed. What kind of sick joke is this? The other boy smirked arrogantly. What joke? One of his lackeys stepped forward, clearly ready to get physical. You seem a bit too relaxed, bastard. Before he could act, he was stopped probably, because he is afraid of the professors might be watching. The blonde-haired bully turned back toward Russell and taunted, I told you to copy the homework for me, didn't I? And yet you just slept through class. Russell's eyes widened as he recognized the familiar face, Corma Frederick. With a sharp, threatening glare, Corma growled, If you don't want to die, come with us to the restroom now. The three of them left and Russell stayed behind, chuckling quietly. Yeah, stuff like this used to happen. Suddenly, a strange holographic interface appeared in front of him, displaying his own face. What the mission escape from being bullied? Objective. Teach the 3 classroom bullies a lesson. Reward, low-tier mana stone. Russell hesitantly reached out to touch the system screen. Is this an illusion? But it wasn't. It was real, right in front of his eyes. Corma turned back impatient. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Not coming. The tone of threat in his voice was repulsive. You know, running won't help, right? We're inside the academy. Then, with a sneer, but hey, if you're scared, go ahead and run. Let's see what happens. Russell narrowed his eyes, staring at them. Fine. Plans began forming in his head, and for a moment he forgot the mission. First, I'm going to teach them a proper lesson. After years of surviving as a mercenary, nothing could compare to the killing intent he had once felt from real monsters. The 3 bullies quickly gathered in the restroom, but immature kids in terms of power level. One of them, holding a cigar in his mouth, sneered provocatively. So the little larva decided to crawl in here, huh? Russell looked at him calmly and replied, Of course, you damned cockroach. One of the lackeys growled in fury. This guy's lost his mind. Russell slowly approached the one who had spoken. The boy panicked and raised his fists. Looks like you really want a beating, huh? Without a word, the thug charged straight at Russell. But things were different now. Russell's strength had completely changed. Those punches felt like nothing more than mosquito bites. In a swift counter, Russell landed a heavy blow to the thug's stomach, sending him flying backward and spitting saliva as he collapsed to the floor. Another lackey, enraged at the sight, lunged forward. You piece of trash! He shouted, only to be silenced immediately with a punch straight to the face. Corma stood still watching as his 2 underlings were taken down in an instant. With a sneer, he muttered honestly and tossed away his cigar. So because you can't use magic, you've picked up some cheap hand-to-hand moves? Russell remained silent, letting the insults pass, as expected from a fallen noble house. Pathetic. Corma then slipped 4 rings onto his fingers. Magic isn't allowed inside the academy, but clearly you have no idea we can still use minor artifacts. Without further talk, Corma charged forward, fist clenched. Die, you low-born bastard! But before the punch could land, Russell dodged with ease and intercepted the blow without effort. He froze, stunned by Russell's sudden, overwhelming strength. In a flash, Russell grabbed his wrist and twisted it backward with brutal force, snapping it. Corma screamed in agony and dropped to the ground, clutching his broken wrist. Russell stood over him, eyes cold. Your friends have already outranked you on the leaderboard. And even your own family gave up on a dumb fool like you. You shy away from anyone stronger, yet always pick on those weaker. Typical coward. His voice grew more biting. And you dare mention my family, you worthless trash. Korma, who had moments ago looked like the predator, now curled on the floor like prey. Russell towered over him like a demon in human form. Wait, hold on, please, but Russell didn't wait. He threw a punch straight into Korma's face, cutting off any chance for excuses. Let me explain. The voice echoed in the restroom, but Russell had already turned away with a razor-sharp glare. From now on, you'd better behave yourselves, if you want to stay alive. Leaving the three of them sprawled on the floor, Russell walked out of the restroom, only to slump down against the hallway wall. Exhausted. Did I go too far? He whispered, a flicker of regret flashing in his lifeless eyes. My eyes. They're so tired. Then, as if responding to his thoughts, the system interface popped up once again, piquing his curiosity. Low-tier mana stone consumable. A small, sharp crystal appeared in his palm. Russell stared at it. Consumable. Does it want me to eat this thing? He turned it over in his hand, hesitant. Seriously, eat this even cavemen didn't eat rocks. Despite his doubts, after a moment of internal struggle, he made his choice and popped it into his mouth. The system chimed immediately. You have absorbed a low-tier mana stone. He chewed cautiously, noting the odd texture and taste. Maybe this really is an opportunity, like getting a second shot at life. The moment he swallowed, a surge of power burst through his body. The energy from the crystal ignited instantly. Notification. You have obtained mana from the mana stone. A powerful force was coursing through him, making Russell feel pain deep in his soul. Wallowing, the mana stone had triggered a surge of intense energy within his body. He could slowly feel it, mana spilling out from him. Notification. The mana in the circle is increasing. His heart pounded wildly as the magic circle absorbed the energy. After a while, he finally managed to absorb it all, and everything began to stabilize. Thank goodness it's stabilizing. He gazed at his hands filled with joy. The process of absorbing the mana stone had been exhilarating. I'm sure I can control it. Manage the flow of mana. The collapse of his noble family being expelled from the academy and becoming a low-tier mercenary. I could change his fate. With a bright mood and a strong body, Russell headed for Professor Hubert's office. Come in. Excuse me. Professor Hubert was already sitting waiting for him. Sit down. Russell sat down. The professor softly spoke as Russell looked at the teacups and pastries on the table. Today, you seem different. Professor Hubert noticed how unusual Russell seemed in class today. Could it be? After a moment of thought, he spoke, causing Russell to look confused. Is something troubling you? He took a sip of his tea. I've heard that some of your classmates are bullying you. Professor Hubert in his previous life had always helped him until the very end. The professor's kindness made Russell feel secretly relieved inside. I've always wanted to say this. When he returned from the past, Russell felt confident in his strength. You don't need to worry, sir. The professor looked at him, not quite believing his ears. Thank you so much, Professor. The professor coughed lightly. As a teacher, it's my job to take care of my students. Russell nodded like a naive child in front of him. At that moment, the professor handed him a book. Since you slept during class, you'll have to be punished. Professor Hubert opened the book to a page. It won't be easy. Write an analysis report from pages 62 to 74 of the Advanced Element Research. Then he closed the book. This is a section even the senior students struggle with. The system interface appeared. Notification: mission complete. Professor Hubert's assignment. The reward depends on the level of completion and Professor Hubert's level of satisfaction. Reward: the lowest grade mana stone consumable. Russell stared at the system's reward. Is the assignment also a task now? Professor Hubert noticed Russell lost in thought and asked, What's wrong? Is it too difficult? Russell quickly responded, No, it's fine. He was more than happy to accept the assignment. Thank you, sir. Inside his room, the bright sunlight streamed through the window. Russell sat wearily in his chair. The analysis assignment given by Professor Hubert was almost complete. It wasn't difficult. In his previous life, due to his limited mana, he had buried himself in theoretical studies to make up for it. Even as a mercenary, he never stopped learning. Remembering those days, he gazed out the window in silence. But in this life, there was something just as important as studying. It is training his mana flow. Mana flow is the path through which mana moves. Mana is absorbed through breathing. flows through the mana channels and accumulates in the heart. Back then, he had been trying to fight a giant monster. It kept attacking him relentlessly. Russell struggled to defend himself against its blows, and from that he learned how to create magic and conjure a fire spell. In other words, the stronger the mana flow, the more mana could be gathered and released faster. The monster continued charging at him. At that moment, Russell realized he couldn't withstand much longer and quickly used his shield. Suddenly he glanced at the monster charging toward him with immense force, crashing into a large stone. But the stone shattered. His mana flow was incredibly narrow and weak, and he was slammed against the wall. Behind him, a glow emanated of the mana flow. He could feel it. Suddenly, Russell was sucked into a deep pool. Did heaven pity my unfortunate fate, or was this just luck? He lay collapsed on the cold ground. After regaining his senses, Russell quickly propped himself up on his hands and sat up. His gaze fell forward, staring into the vast space, a historical ruin of unknown origin. Inside, there were 2 spellbooks. He quickly reached out to grab them, the abundant flow and the wizard's body. Outside, a hurried footstep was approaching. The abundant flow helped strengthen the body and amplify the mana flow. The wizard's body replaced muscle bundles as part of the mana flow. In other words, the healthier the body, the more stable the mana flow. When he had a grown-up body, not much changed, but now that his body was still developing, the results would be more noticeable. This time he would succeed and narrow the mana flow. Beneath the sunset light on the school grounds, he pushed himself to practice until exhaustion. After a while, he gasped for breath. I'm so tired. I think that's enough for today. The system appeared: mission practice, the ancient magic over vein. Run 5 kilometers, current achievement, 0.05 to 5 kilometer. He stared at the screen, disappointed. The system had been silent until now, suddenly appearing with this notification. When practicing over vein, you can repeatedly do this mission once a day. The required distance will change based on the level of over vein. Once a certain level is reached, this task will no longer appear. He quickly withdrew his hand, feeling rushed, sweat dotting his face. All right, I'll run. I have to make the most of this opportunity. I can't just sit here. He ran for a while, the distance increasing. His legs trembled, and his body went numb, feeling like he was about to collapse. But the number on the system still wasn't enough. He leaned on his knees and groaned. Just a little more. Then, gathering all his strength, he sprinted faster. Notification: you have completed the mission, providing your rewards. He collapsed to the ground, unable to move any longer. A person was secretly watching him. How am I going to get back to the dorm? The person stared at him with envious eyes. All this effort is in vain, Russell Raymond. Professor Hubert looked at the stack of papers on the desk and silently praised, I didn't expect you to draw such profound conclusions from those academic materials. But Hubert still asked to be sure you personally prepared this report right. Russell confidently nodded. Yes, I can swear on my mana oath. Hubert furrowed his brows. A mana oath. That confidence is a bit too much. Russell's face lit up even as he made the oath. When he boldly made such a vow, the professor didn't investigate further and picked up the stack of reports, smiling. I'm very satisfied with your work. The system immediately popped up. You have completed the mission. Rewards include lowest grade mana stone, additional gem of the same size, and some knowledge along with accompanying effects. This meant that the deeper his knowledge, the stronger he would become. Russell's red eyes turned to the professor. If that's the case. Hubert said, well done, you can go now. But Russell stayed, suddenly exclaiming, Professor, have a request to make. Do you want to use the faculty library? May I ask why Hubert was a bit curious. The student library already has enough books to meet your needs. Russell calmly responded, I've read all the books there already. The professor's finger trembled in disbelief. All of them. Yes. He leaned back in his chair. I can't believe it. But still, using the faculty library is a different matter. He interlaced his fingers and became serious. I'll see if you qualify. Russell knew this was his chance and eagerly agreed. Yes, I completely agree. Thanks to that, his system window was now filled with assignments from Professor Hubert. Sitting under a green tree, he sighed quietly. I can't believe he gave me so many assignments. Haha, well, he's strict after all. Sweat dripped down his face and he wiped it away. But the more one understands magical theory, the stronger they become. He made a firm resolve: I must obtain the advanced knowledge from the faculty library at all costs. Russell opened a glass jar and drank water. The reward for completing the mission was a mana stone. He could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Suddenly someone appeared and called out to him in annoyance, "Russell Raymond." And Tun appeared with his annoying lackeys. "I heard you carry a cursed mana flow, but it looks like you're a training fanatic. One of my friends suffered because of you." Russell wasn't afraid. "You're here for revenge, huh?" And Tun scoffed revenge. He scowled and insulted. "Stop dreaming. Who would want to take revenge on a useless loser like you?" Russell coldly glanced at them with his red eyes. "Just trampling you is enough." And Tun walked past him, deliberately brushing against Russell's shoulder. "See you in class." One of his lackeys ran after him and asked, "Aren't you going to deal with him now, idiot? There's no audience here for us." A breeze blew, and Russell's scarf and hair fluttered. He thought to himself, the class. The thing Tun mentioned was the Practical Magic Combat class, a place where students are graded based on the results of mock combat matches. Russell clearly remembered how miserable he had been in that class. It was where he had been looked down upon and bullied. And Tun stood before him, surrounded by flames, grinning with sinister delight. "I can't believe I forgot those memories." But things were different now. Russell no longer cared about those things. He was prepared. The system appeared mission. Achieve the 2nd circle. Increase the level of understanding of the attributes you currently possess. Russell diligently studied theory and focused on writing his essay. He also trained his body, sweating profusely but not stopping. Russell handed a large stack of assignments to Professor Hubert. Notifications about rewards from the system flooded in. That night, Russell stood before the desk staring at the small stones he had placed on it. He had the mana stones. His hand hovered over them, but paused. Can my mana flow control these stones? His eyes widened as he thought, cold sweat dripping down his cheek. He closed his eyes to calm himself and reassured himself, I just need to trust in what I've practiced so far. Russell bit into the mana stone, devouring it greedily. At first there was no reaction from his body, but soon a surge of magic ignited within him like a flame. A burst of white light exploded around him, making him stagger. His eyes turned completely white as he felt an intense heat enveloping him, his body seemingly on fire. His legs buckled beneath him, and the fiery mana flow surged uncontrollably. He knew he had to quickly establish a mana flow. Holding his face, he focused and determined the mana flow. His hand touched his chest, gathering the core strength at the center of his body. He gritted his teeth and concentrated, following the steps to initiate a new circle. His heart pounded amidst the flames. The mana circle was intricate and growing larger by the second. If he failed, his heart wouldn't survive. The magical circle grew more complicated, expanding further. Russell took a deep breath, reassuring himself, I've made my decision. He continued to breathe steadily, gathering the mana flow into the core, his hands trying to steady the magic without disrupting it. No matter what, I must complete this. Suddenly a mana pillar shot out through the window into the night. Russell felt an entirely new sensation, realizing that he had succeeded. Mana gathered in his chest, flowing more evenly, but he was utterly exhausted and collapsed. A single thought kept circling in his mind, the 2nd circle. Russell fell to the floor as mana still swirled around his heart. The system notification appeared. You have completed the mission and received the reward. Your understanding of the fire attribute has greatly risen. The power of your fire magic has been enhanced. His knowledge of other attributes appeared in a similar fashion. After a long night of leveling up, the morning sun shone into Hubert's room. Hubert sat at his desk, his tone serious. Excellent. I didn't expect you to finish all the tasks I gave you. All right, here's the final question. He carefully considered before asking. The question was more basic than the previous one's practical. Hubert then spoke among the 4 structures that constitute magic, which one is the most important? Russell's face showed surprise, and he didn't immediately answer. Professor Hubert grew impatient and said, right. I'm asking a question I only recently found the answer to myself. He slammed his hand on the desk, preparing to change the question. Never mind, I'll ask a different one. But Russell spoke up before Hubert could. The answer is... Hubert froze after hearing Russell's answer. He thought in shock, how does he know the answer? Russell calmly faced his professor and responded. The answer was brief but difficult to find, and yet Russell said it with a composed expression. Hubert's hand gripped the desk tightly. He adjusted his glasses and asked, Why do you think that? Russell's eyes darkened slightly when asked. He looked at his palm and answered, Magic is... He mentally visualized a zodiac circle. Magic allows the materialization of something into the real world using mana. The world categorizes this process into 4 levels. The first is synchronization, where one learns the laws of natural phenomena. Then comes mental imagery, where one reimagines what has been learned inside the mind, and builds formulas to develop visual representations. Finally, there's deployment, where magic is manifested through the understanding of the formula, which can be learned through effort. However, mental imagery cannot be attained just through effort. Breaking personal limits to reach free imagination is key. Through courage, that is what defines the level of mental imagery. In his mind, Russell imagined holding a flame. This is a flame. He closed his eyes and began to control it. If he treated the flame as an arrow, it would immediately take form as a fire magic projectile. The mana soared above him, but if he imagined something else, it would turn into something completely different. In the shadow of Russell was an image of a withered branch. If his imagination was not limited, suddenly a crack appeared, the darkness shattered by the breaking of a strange creature, leaving flames in its wake. He could even create things that didn't exist in this world, impossible fantasies. His words silenced Hubert. It was true. A small flame appeared in the palm of Russell's hand, like a shadow cast by the sun. He clenched his fist, making the flame vanish, or icy heat. Everything originates from understanding the world. Russell looked forward with confidence, but ended by disrupting the rules of the world. His thoughts were no longer immature. Instead, they reflected a deep understanding of magic that was the essence of magic. Hubert gazed at his determined eyes and muttered, "This child. Just as I thought." Professor Hubert smiled and said, "The Academy's library is too small a world for you." With his approval, the system notified Russell that the mission had been completed, granting him access to the departmental library. Bookshelves towering higher than him surrounded the area. As he observed, Russell marveled at the size of the library. The first floor was already vast. The gentle sunlight filtered through the glass doors. Every space here was neat and clean, a stark contrast to the student library. He picked several books and placed them on the table: 3-dimensional magic projectiles, advanced magical herbology. Russell happily opened one book and began reading. It was very practical. His eyes gleamed as he absorbed the information, not neglecting the basic theories of magic. Suddenly, a pair of unfamiliar high heels approached Russell, but he remained focused on his book. The woman glanced at the book he was reading and praised, "Oh, you're reading a rather interesting book." Russell's heart skipped a beat, his eyes widening. He quickly spun his chair to look behind him, but there was no one there. "What?" The woman spoke up. "Over here, kid." She appeared wearing a tight-fitting dress, holding a drumstick and a matching hat. This person was... She smiled at him, and Russell, astonished, blurted out her name, Snow White Daria. He quickly stood up and bowed, saying, "It's an honor to meet the master of the fire tower. I am Russell Raymond." Sweat poured down his face, and Russell dared only to secretly glance up at Daria. She was an 8-circle mage. There were very few people in the world who could match her. Although over 80 years old, she had used an immense amount of mana to maintain her youthful appearance. The most prestigious magic tower of the red magic sect, Snow White, Daria, the master of fire magic. Daria happily replied, "Oh, so you know me," Russell silently wondered. "But how is she here? Don't be so tense." Daria offered a lollipop and reassured Russell, "I'm just a traveling companion along your journey." Russell, confused, pointed at himself when he saw the candy. "For me." So they walked together in the library of the academy. Russell sucked on the candy while Daria asked him, "But how did a student like you get access to a professor's library?" Russell carefully answered, "Professor Hubert allowed me to enter." Daria turned and looked surprised. "That stubborn guy." Upon hearing the nickname she gave the professor, Russell could only smile, thinking Hubert must be itching in his ears right now. Daria continued to discuss with him. "By the way, what you're studying is quite interesting." She felt the magical flow around Russell's body and commented, "The mana is incredibly pure. The mana distribution is very stable too." Daria's eyes lit up due to her magical inspection of him, such a rare sight. A wave of worry rose inside Russell. Did she notice something? Daria stood beside him and reassured him, "Don't worry." She kept smiling kindly. "I'm not here to lecture you or anything." Russell quickly lowered his head to show respect. "Thank you." Daria's drumstick slammed onto the ground with a thud. A wave of power appeared and illuminated around Russell, which surprised him. Daria then disappeared. She didn't forget to leave him with a message: make sure to develop your abilities to the fullest, kid. Russell looked up, his eyes shining. He was stunned for a moment before he could respond, yes, Master of Fire Magic. Russell stayed in the library until dusk. He carefully closed the library door, still feeling a bit overwhelmed. He didn't expect to meet her here. Russell smiled. What an unexpected stroke of luck. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Isn't that Russell behind him were the bullies and Anton? Why is he coming out of the professor's library? Who does he think he is? Anton sneered at his friend. Well, I guess he's been tailing the professor, but that won't change anything. He turned and continued walking. Keep trying. The mocking tone didn't change. No matter what you do, it's useless. Russell didn't argue with him and simply smiled to himself. The next day, during the practical magic class, the students sat in the observation seats. The instructor spoke at length about the rules here. The first student called would step down to the arena and choose another student as their opponent. The professors often picked the weakest student, so that the chosen one could pick someone at their own level. Russell heard snickers around him. In his past life, he was always the first to be called. Other students whispered loudly, it's probably going to be Russell again. Of course he has a bottleneck with his mana. Some even went as far as calling out to him, Russell, please pick me. I need to raise my grade this semester. Hey, pick me. Don't pick that guy. Quiet. The instructor's shout echoed. Now I will pick a student, and the first one is... The crowd secretly laughed, waiting for Russell's name to be called. But they froze and stared in shock when the name announced wasn't his, Anton Frederick. Anton immediately stepped down, leaving a crowd of students in confusion. Anton, why is Anton first? He passed the professor, both smiling mysteriously. Anton whispered to him, thanks, Professor. The professor squinted, replying, compared to the benefits from the Frederick Trading Guild, this is nothing. Russell looked down at the scene and thought, I knew it. Anton stepped onto the arena. He swung his leg and then looked directly at the person he had been targeting. What are you still sitting there for? Get down here. The person Anton chose could be no one else. Russell crossed his arms coldly, watching him. Russell Raymond. Professor Hubert brewed himself a cup of tea, then sat down, saying, if you intended to come here, you should have let me know beforehand. Snow-white Daria turned her gaze to the window, looking at the scenery outside Professor. Then Daria turned and walked back inside. It's fine. She sat down on the sofa and said, isn't it normal for a teacher to visit a student? Her fingers gently tapped on her teacup. Daria then asked, so you gave a little kid named Russell a professor's library pass? Hubert was surprised when she suddenly brought up this matter. Yes. Did he do something wrong? Daria lifted the cup of tea, her mood seemingly quite good as she replied, no. It's been a long time since I've seen something so rare. Hubert misunderstood her meaning and worried looked down at his hands. She continued, yes. Russell's narrow mana flow is an abnormal condition, even here on the continent. Daria suddenly scolded him. You're such a fool. Hubert jumped, asking what? Daria then revealed the truth. That child has already healed himself. What? Daria gently set her cup down to explain. She touched her lips and told him that the boy had already completed his second magic circle. Hubert was shocked and exclaimed, Russell has already reached the second magic circle. Back to the practice arena of the practical magic class, Russell stepped onto the field to face Anton. Before him, the system suddenly triggered a notification. Mission win during magic training. Reward lowest grade magic stone X2 compartment unlocked. Russell paid special attention to the second reward. He smiled, thinking a space compartment, a magic only the wealthiest mages can use. It would be really useful for storing mana stones. At this moment, Anton began speaking with taunting words. Hey bug, don't you realize the situation you're in? If you want to live, then... He arrogantly commanded Russell beg. Russell scoffed at his words. Ha beg. He wasn't about to back down either, unleashing his fiery mana. Me. Anton was taken aback, staring at Russell's mana in shock. The magic. Could it be? From the observation area, the professor's voice rang out, get into your positions. I will start the match. Anton immediately created a magic sphere in his palm. Gritting his teeth in irritation, a person with narrow mana flow can already reach the second magic circle. Impossible. He launched his second circle Fire Blast, sending a huge flame towards Russell. Russell watched the heat flying toward him a little surprised, but quickly raised his hand to form a shield. The shield caused the flames to deflect and rise high into the air. Russell furrowed his brow watching the bright light radiating from the fire magic. A professor watching the match applauded. Unbelievable. The boy broke the shield and used its angle to protect himself from the fire heat. Meanwhile, the professor, who was in cahoots with Anton, was feeling extremely nervous. Russell, is this kid hiding his abilities? Anton clenched his muscles and threw another fire blast. He groaned weakly. Can you handle this? Suddenly, the magic Anton released began to dwindle, which made him furious. Damn it! My firepower! Russell noticed his abnormality and immediately seized the opportunity. Now's the time. Russell concealed one of his arms and unleashed his second circle spell, the fire arrow which he had created before. Then Russell quickly shot his arrow. Anton saw the arrow flying through his flame shield and was stunned. A fire arrow. He immediately pulled his hand back and formed a shield. Did he really reach the second magic circle? The fire arrow launched by Russell was powerful, striking like a column of fire straight into Anton's shield. Anton trembled before the overwhelming force, but his arrogant nature still prevented him from feeling fear. You damn bastard! Before he could recover from this surprise, he widened his eyes and looked ahead. Russell now looked terrifying, holding another arrow in his hand. This is absurd. How has he already fired a second fire arrow? The arrow flew and ignited fiercely, making the air grow hotter. Not just one, but numerous fire arrows soared toward Anton. The two professors watching were puzzled, asking each other, dual casting? I'm not sure, said the plump professor. I don't think it's dual casting. Perhaps his casting speed is so fast it seems like dual casting. After a while of blocking Russell's attacks, Anton began to sneer. Is that all you know, firing fire arrows? His shield, which was golden before slowly turned red. Well then, there's a way. Anton activated his second circle spell, Fire Shield, creating a polygonal barrier around himself, an enchanted shield with fire resistance. Russell didn't falter. Instead, he smiled in satisfaction. I've been waiting for you to use this move. Anton, feeling quite proud of his defensive shield, thought to himself, if I counterattack after his mana runs out, victory will be mine. Russell raised his hand and slowly created a gentle binding wind. A whirlwind formed in the middle of the arena, the wind blowing powerfully. Anton, in horror, shouted, What's going on? Russell used his second circle spell, the wind arrow, and shot it straight at Anton, causing him to stagger back, eyes wide in shock. The way Russell identified the weakness in Anton's shield and switched his attack spell left the observing professor wide-eyed. Is this still the Russell I know? The sly professor was also sweating, nervously stunned. From behind their seats, a familiar figure emerged to watch the match. Anton collapsed to the ground, clutching his stomach and groaning like an ant. His face contorted in pain as his heart thudded wildly from the shock. At that moment, Russell rushed in front of him. He had already prepared a clenched fist, his anger ready to deliver a punishment. Anton hurriedly spoke, attempting to cast a spell, but Russell's punch was faster. Then Anton took a full punch to the stomach, instantly silenced. He struggled to spit out a mouthful of saliva, his mind losing focus as he couldn't see anything anymore. His arm weakly lifted to attempt casting magic. Russell continued to swing his arm forward, this punch like a beast tormenting its prey, striking Anton square in the face. The professor couldn't take it anymore and jumped up. What magic is that? Stop the match immediately. But another voice interrupted. This is not magic, is it? Hubert calmly observed the fight, closely watching the aura protecting Russell. The professor immediately turned to follow Hubert's gaze. The glowing aura surrounding Russell was powerful. Was he using mana like a knight's magical shield? Professor Hubert smiled in satisfaction. I don't know where the boy learned it from, but he certainly knows how to use it. Russell punched Anton again, this time adding more force. The magical shield intensified, making the punch even stronger. A voice echoed, You've found a way, Russell. At that moment, Russell gave his all, creating a terrifying force that surrounded him. With a powerful punch, his mana hit Anton's face. His pupils glowed red, Russell's face full of killing intent. A second later, Anton fell hard to the ground, his body slamming onto cracked tiles, the impact so intense that it caused the earth to shake. Everyone who witnessed this scene was in shock, eyes wide in disbelief. The middle-aged man with glasses was sweating profusely, thinking how. One person, seeing the man still dazed, asked, "What are you doing?" The man turned his eyes, startled. It was Professor Hubert, sitting beside him, laughing loudly. Hubert urged him hurry up and announce the winner. The person looked at Hubert's contented face, blinking in confusion, then stammered, "Ah, yes." Immediately, he raised his fist above his head, declaring loudly, "The winner is—" Russell stood, one hand in his pocket, wiping the corner of his mouth, when his name was called out, Russell Raymond. The middle-aged man quickly walked toward him. He raised his hand, covering his mouth, to cough, and announced, "Well done. You can go now." Contrary to his wish, Russell casually said, "It's not over yet." He asked in surprise, "What do you mean?" Russell looked at the system board before him and slowly spoke. "According to the career rules," he began explaining to him, "if the winner doesn't want to stop, they can call for the next opponent." The others heard this and were so scared they started to sweat. Russell stood in the arena, raising a finger to indicate who the next opponent was. The system immediately announced, "Mission win the magic duel. Reward complete the lowest grade Mana Stone X2. There will be additional rewards in the case of consecutive wins." His pupils turned red again. Russell smirked, challenging, "Come on." Not long after, Professor Hubert held a cup of hot tea in his hand, standing by the window, muttering, 14 consecutive wins, huh? He looked down at the pile of papers on his desk, silently admiring he's quite sharp. He pondered, realizing that even though he had only met Russell once, he could already see the potential in his mana. He looked at himself through the teacup and wondered, how did that kid develop so quickly? Professor Hubert recalled the times Russell fought fiercely, silently calling his name. "Russell Raymond!" Meanwhile, on Russell's side, the system continued to notify, "You have completed the mission. Reward compartment has been unlocked. From now on, rewards will automatically be inputted into the compartment. You have received mana stones." Such messages appeared one after another, ending with one final message, "You have received a reward," followed by 3 large question marks. This message confused Russell, making him turn to look at it. Less than a second later, the compartment opened before him. Russell looked at the purple circle and was somewhat surprised. A reward in the compartment. He slowly reached into the mysterious compartment. Suddenly, he noticed something strange that left him speechless. Russell pulled out a long ancient map with a red 10 marked on it. Russell hesitated. "Is this a map?" The system quickly displayed, "Mission I go to the location marked on the map and complete the mission assigned there. When you approach the location, the lights will guide your way. Unknown reward for passing the trial. Intermediate grade Mana Stones, X5. Warning, try after reaching the 3rd circle." Russell read the last line, pondering, "Try after reaching the 3rd circle." He remembered the circle filled with strange symbols and the red-orange color, lost in thought. The 3rd magical circle before the reset, he had tried countless times, but never reached that level. Could he make it this time? Furthermore, he held the map without knowing where the location was. "Where is this?" Russell climbed the stairs to find a book in the library. If I can make use of the information in the professor's library. In the end, he took out a stack of books with hope, thinking he might find a clue. At that moment, he eagerly opened one book to read. The first was about the outskirts of the Andy Kingdom. He turned to the next page then, about the coastal area of the empire. He still couldn't find what he was looking for. His face fell. It must be mentioned here, right? The notes about the overseas regions. In the library, the sound of pages turning mixed with his voice. "This book here, too." Despite going through thousands of books, Russell still had to facepalm. Oh no, nothing matches the location on the map. He walked out in frustration, rubbing his chin, cursing quietly. "Damn it, I've wasted so much time looking for the location on the map." He suddenly had an idea. "Now I'll focus on reaching the 3rd magical circle first." At the same time, he looked up and saw everyone standing in 2 rows in front of him, whispering about him. Last time... Hey, look. Russell squinted and looked down. Not being ignored or bullied anymore. Although he smiled on the outside, he was deeply lonely inside. Still a solitary person. Suddenly someone called his name, Russell Raymond. Hearing this, he turned his head. Professor Hubert walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder and asked, "Can we talk for a bit?" He was momentarily surprised by this request from the professor. Russell looked at him and said, "Oh." He smiled brightly, eagerly replying, "Yes, of course." Outside, the sky was clear, the sunlight shining through the lush green leaves. The professor's voice rang out, "The summer break is almost here." He poured himself a cup of bright hot tea and asked, "Do you have any plans?" Russell sat across from him, took the teacup for himself, and bluntly answered, "Not yet." Professor Hubert sat on the sofa, crossed his legs, and said, "Then would you like to do a research project with me?" Russell was surprised, scoffing a little. The professor pointed at 2 books on the table. "Based on your contribution, your name could even appear right after mine in the authorship. What do you think?" Russell bent down to pick up the book to read. "This is—" But after a short time his eyes widened. Professor Hubert found his reaction confusing. "Russell, what are you thinking?" Russell quickly closed the book, stammering, "I'm sorry, Professor." He didn't hesitate to politely refuse. "Actually, I already have my own plans for this summer." Professor Hubert furrowed his brows, full of doubt. "What do you mean? You just said you didn't have any—" Russell handed him a book. "I will have to go to this place." Professor Hubert looked down, slowly reading, "Going for a vacation in—" he exclaimed in surprise, "Maldiva." After a while, Russell got into a carriage and the old man drove the horses away. He sat in the carriage, looking out the window, breathing in the fresh air from nature. He summoned the compartment, thinking that the journey was long, so he should eat something. Russell pulled out a red item and ate it. "This will fill my stomach." The old man outside, while driving the horses, wiped his sweat, muttering, "It's summer, it's really hot." Suddenly, a red aura emitted from Russell's carriage, making the old man exclaim, "Strange." It was the aura from Russell. He closed his eyes, making a firm resolution inside. "Before I reach Maldiva, I'll have the 3rd circle." Meanwhile, Professor Hubert was still pondering in his room. He raised his hand to his chin, thinking, "The boy is going to Maldiva. That must be a good thing." He thought of a sun-drenched beach with a bright blue cocktail placed on the table. Then an image of a woman in a white shirt, shorts, and platinum blonde hair lying in the sun with a tray of pastries and a cocktail beside her made him think she must be in Maldiva already. At Maldiva Beach, a voice rang out in the clear sky and crystal-clear water. "My homeland has always been this beautiful." The person was lying relaxed on a chair by the beach. A middle-aged woman with platinum hair gently swirled the drink in her hand, enjoying the scenery. "It's been so long since I've had a vacation like this." She brought the cocktail closer to her lips, sighing tiredly. "After protecting the empire, giving lectures on magical research, and mentoring my students." She remembered when she was a powerful woman. Standing in front of students, they had to look up to her in fear. The countdown rang out 9, 6, 3. Then she raised her palm, summoning an energy that flew in a circle. She wore a white outfit with red accents gloves and a red-brimmed hat, gazing at the energy in her hands. She explained to all the mages, "There are 3 numbers that are extremely significant." The students were amazed. She remembered the card that had passed through countless dangers. The number 9 represented the final point of the magical path that a person pursues in their lifetime. The second card, when fighting monsters, represented the completion of the 6th magical circle and the trials one would endure to become a grand mage. Then the third card, depicting a person standing under an ancient tree with the number 3 marking the opening of the first page, when a person begins their solitary journey on the magical path. She gently set her glass down, reflecting on solitude, and crossed her arms. She wondered, "I wonder if that child is doing well now." The person she remembered was none other than a young man with red eyes, Russell. On the side of Russell, the old man stopped the carriage and called out, "We've arrived, dear guest." Not seeing Russell, he worried. Why isn't he getting out of the carriage? Then he awkwardly called out to him, Dear guest, you can get off now." The old man was startled, shouting loudly, "Dear guest?" After a while, a hand grabbed a piece of bread. Russell, holding the bread in one hand and a sausage in the other, was eating heartily. As he ate, he wiped his mouth, looking at the pile of food before him, sighing internally, "I used too much power to stabilize the raging mana." Russell took a sip of water and remembered the moment he passed out. Luckily, an old cart driver had helped him. The man lifted him up while shouting, "Sir, please wake up." Russell drank the water in one gulp, feeling relieved. In the end, he had achieved his goal. Once finished, he slammed the cup down onto the table. Channeling his red magical power, he smirked. The 3rd circle. A bright red ring with strange symbols slowly appeared. He was somewhat surprised by his own abilities, amazed that he had managed to break through his limits in just a few months before returning. Russell took 2 coins in his hand and said to himself, "But this is still not enough to be complacent." He lowered his head and made up his mind to push further. Suddenly, a notification from the system popped up. Mission 1. Find the location marked on the map and solve the following missions. If you go near the area, light will guide you. Russell held the map, thinking hard. I know I need to find the marked spots on the map, but this is my first time, he muttered. Suddenly, a voice from outside caught his attention. Pompeo Volcano Tour, with the most professional guide, an amazing offer available only today. According to mythology, the Grand Pompeo volcano was originally just a normal mountain, and it became a volcano because one day a special creature came to reside there. Russell gazed at the scene before him, pondering. Could something just living here have changed the entire natural environment of the region? He looked at the red mountain, a shadow of a monster in the distance, and deduced only one creature in the world could have that power. That monster in my mind is a fierce fire dragon, the fire dragon. At the same time, the tour guide wearing a dragon-shaped hat made a joke and shouted "wow" several times. The surrounding crowd cheered, clapping continuously, while Russell scowled. I think I'll separate from the group now. Just as he was about to leave, the guide raised his hand to announce, "We're preparing to move on." Russell silently jumped down from the cliff while the guide was still speaking. Next destination. A few seconds later, the guide looked confused. Wait, one person is missing. Russell's feet sank into the clear seawater. He looked at the massive waterfall ahead, thinking, I'm abandoning both the rewards and the possibility of growing stronger after completing this mission. Standing before the waterfall, holding the map, he smiled in satisfaction. It was all about the dragon. Suddenly, a golden light shot up from the map. The lights kept flying upwards, and soon gathered together, forming a golden gem that shot forward, leaving Russell stunned. He watched as the strong light streaked across the surface of the water and wondered, could this be the guiding light? After a moment, it plunged straight into the water. Russell sighed. It's in the waterfall. He quickly gestured behind him, summoning a glowing circle. He shouted wind arrow. Immediately, his weapon materialized from the circle, piercing the waterfall to clear his path. Russell seized the chance and flew inside. As he walked through the cave, he patted his head. Who would have thought there'd be a cave made of lava in here? He continued his search, but after walking a short distance, he grew concerned. The rules said I should wait until I reach the 3rd magical circle before trying, but I don't see any monsters or beasts in here. Russell stopped at the corner of a wall. He looked up at some walls that appeared to be built for defense but were now abandoned. He wondered, a ruin. He placed his hand on a pillar vines climbing it and wondered how long it had existed. Suddenly, a strange sound made him perk up his ears. He turned to see a blinding golden light coming from the middle of a gate. On either side stood 2 stone statues serving as guards. Here it is. I've been wondering where you were. Turns out you're here. Russell slowly approached. His steps quickened as he felt something strange behind him. Unease filled his heart. Damn, did I forget my instincts from when I was a mercenary? Have I let my guard down? He furrowed his brows and glanced behind him. I should have noticed by now. If there were no signs of monsters or beasts and no sounds, it meant that a powerful creature was suppressing the area. Suddenly, a massive dragon stared directly at him. Russell froze. A Kadam dragon. The dragon roared loudly and swung its tail behind it. The force of the blow shattered. Russell quickly flew upwards, calling its name Komodo dragon. His eyes widened as he stared at it. This is a creature that would take at least 2 mercenary teams to handle. Just as Russell landed on the ground, the dragon charged at him. He quickly devised a plan. The only thing I can do now is run. He opened his palm, summoning his emerald magic power. His feet firmly planted, his hands crackling with green lightning. He prepared his ultimate move. Magical Circle 2. Lightning Arrow. The dragon roared as it crawled toward him. Russell gritted his teeth, gripped his sharp weapon, and with all his might swung it directly at the dragon. The arrow instantly struck the dragon's forehead. The dragon stood up, howling in pain as the lightning surged through its body. Russell seized the opportunity to dash away. I'll buy some time with that move. Russell ran toward the gate. I'll head straight for the stone gate. Suddenly, 2 spears crossed to form the word person. A voice echoed, prove that you deserve to enter the gate with your mana. Russell gaped at the scene, cursing, what the hell? He glanced at the dragon that had chased him, letting out a terrifying roar, and now I'm blocked by these two spears. He thought to himself, I can't get through. Russell stomped his foot hard on the ground, creating a burst of red energy. If I can't dodge... He raised his left hand, with his two right fingers touching his left wrist, forming a golden arcane energy. His pupils turned yellow, and his entire body was enveloped by a deadly red aura. Then I just need to make my own path. A rocket arrow slowly formed from his wrist, surrounded by the red aura. Russell drew a magic circle and muttered fire missile. The red gem on the gate slowly began to absorb his red mana. Suddenly, the dragon widened its eyes, seemingly affected by something, and stopped lowering its head. Russell launched the fire missile at it, but the dragon remained motionless. He was puzzled. Why did it stop? The dragon suddenly stood up straight, startling Russell. It stomped its foot hard on the ground, its pupils looking down, and its body collapsed. It bowed its head before Russell, making him even more confused. What's going on? The two spears in front of the gate opened. A voice rang out, "You have proven yourself." The gem on the gate blazed brightly. It emitted an incredibly strong aura right in front of Russell. After a moment, he held his head and groaned. My head. When Russell opened his eyes and looked around, he was surprised. The scene had changed. He placed his hand on the crystal-clear ice sheet through which he could see his own reflection and softly asked ice. He knelt on the icy floor, surrounded by massive stone statues, confused as he asked, "Where am I?" He looked around. Is this a teleportation spell? I was just in a cave? Suddenly a strange sound caught his attention. He looked up to see a strange red weapon glowing, chained by several loops of chains, muttering, "That is..." At that moment, a system notification appeared: Mission 2: defeat all the ice golems in the area and clear the Trial of Fire. Reward intermediate grade mana stones X5. He froze in shock. Ice golems. Russell turned to glance at the side. The stone statues began to move. He muttered, "The golems are the ones," breaking the ice layers on their bodies forcefully. The ice golems immediately surrounded the small Russell. He was horrified. Do I have to defeat all of them? Without wasting a moment, he summoned the fire missile in his hand and swung it to the side. Damn, this is getting pretty chaotic. The bright red missile shot off at his command, heading straight for the chest of one of the ice golems. He watched as dust and smoke filled the air after the impact, mentally calculating, to kill a golem, I need to destroy the core inside them. The fire and ice turned to ash in an instant, but a thought flashed through his mind. The golem he hit earlier suddenly sat up. He looked at its chest and felt worried. I only made a crack. Russell gritted his teeth looking at the situation. How hard is the ice they create? He raised his hand again, summoning another arcane energy. If fire doesn't work, the winds around my hands will, so I'll use wind. But something made him stop. What? At that moment, the ice golem charged toward him, raising both arms to the sky. Was he unable to cast spells? Russell firmly raised his palm toward it. Lightning flashed and disappeared in an instant, making him curse. Ah! The ice golem slammed its fist down onto the ground, shattering the ice floor, scattering pieces everywhere. Fortunately, he managed to dodge to the side. Russell stepped back a few paces, his face scratched from being hit by flying ice shards. He thought of the system notification earlier. A line of text caught his attention. Defeat all golems in the area and clear the Trial of Fire. The ice golem raised both arms again, aiming to grab him. He dodged while thinking, fire trial. I guess I can only use fire magic. Suddenly his foot kicked a stone and he staggered, leaning against the wall. The ice golems marched toward him. Russell held his shoulder, his body shaking. What a terrible hobby. He wiped the blood off his forehead. He quickly summoned the magic circle for the fire missile again. His brow furrowed and his eyes sharpened. All right. He ignited himself with flames, causing the golems to stare at him in confusion. He firmly declared, I will do it. Blazing magma streaked out. It was launched violently from the crack in the golem's chest, creating a huge explosion that enveloped the area in smoke. Russell was forced to run to the corner of the wall to avoid contact. The golem looked up in surprise, but then Russell's pupils widened, as if he were calculating something. Suddenly, a massive stream of lava shot at the golem, its destructive power many times greater than the previous blasts. It shattered the golem's massive form. His arm remained in the attack stance from earlier. He was breathing heavily, thinking, I've only dealt with 2 so far. Still lost in thought, he added, "At this rate, I'll run out of energy before I defeat them all." As he pondered, the golems began to stir again. Part of Russell's face was covered in blood, and his body looked exhausted. I need to find another way. One golem swung its massive fist toward him. The impact created chaos, forcing Russell to turn and flee. He was thinking about how to solve the situation when he imagined something. Behind the golem, a soldier appeared wielding a weapon. The soldier was breaking something of another soldier to immediately shatter the thick ice of the golems. I need to focus my strength in one point. Suddenly, Russell's eyes widened. Maybe I figured it out. The answer is density. He acted while thinking. First, he would run far to cast his magic. He moved quickly to a new position, his speed so fast that no shadow remained behind. He ran behind the golems and placed both hands in front of him, horizontally preparing for the fire missile. In between his hands, a spark appeared resembling a weapon, with a formula to amplify it outward. He quickly followed through with his thoughts. The fire spark grew larger and kept upgrading. I'll add the formula to simulate fire and thunder. The end of the spark began to glow red, and more sparks appeared in similar shapes. Russell frowned, then extended his hands, controlling the sparks to merge everything together. 5 weapons formed from the hovering flames in the air, surrounded by swirling fire. His thoughts peaked at that moment. Compression formula. Russell pushed the 5 weapons together with both hands. His eyes were wide open as he focused all his energy into his hands to combine everything. Suddenly, the golem's foot stomped, creating a shockwave that shook the ground. It raised its arm, preparing to strike at Russell. He was still struggling with the 5 weapons and yelled, "Damn, please just combine already." Then a burst of light shone from something, and Russell's hope seemed to have come true. The legs of the golem earlier seemed to have lost their stability. The other golems now looked up and saw a large hole in its chest. This caused it to begin losing its arms. Pieces of the golem shattered and fell everywhere. Russell was now firmly gripping the spear that had just been fused in his hands. His pupils turned yellow. It glowed brightly, standing out among his other features. He held the spear out in front, his gaze somewhat indifferent as he looked far off. The system displayed a notification. Your understanding of intermediate fire elements have transcended beyond limits. Your understanding of the intermediate fire element has significantly increased. Russell turned his head slightly to glance at the spear now towering above his head and thought that he could feel it. Its power was at least on par with a level 5 magic circle. He gripped the shaft of the spear tighter. Even maintaining it was draining a large amount of energy. His body quickly shifted into a running stance. So I'll fight first. With the spear in hand, he charged toward the golems. His face became stiff, his expression looking extremely serious. He flew forward, attacking them in order. Each golem was pierced by the red fiery spear through the center of its chest. Russell then landed in the middle of them. One half of the golems had already been defeated, and they were slowly falling apart. The other half stood tall, their eyes glowing red, staring directly at him. He glanced at the 4 on his left with his burning yellow eyes. A fiery orange light emitted from the spear as it swept through, cutting the golem in half. This caused 2 golems to shatter at once. He thought to himself, now it's down to 2. Suddenly a green slash appeared, and Russell had to tilt to the side to avoid it. One of the remaining golems began attacking. It shot a beam of white energy from its chest to the floor, causing cracks to appear in the surface. With a determined look on his face, Russell raised the spear high, preparing his stance. If I defeat this one, he charged, slashing from the golem's head. Its body was cleaved vertically. Afterward, he returned to his stance, panting heavily and thinking, now just the last one. Suddenly, his eyes flicked to the side, perhaps noticing something. The last golem shot a beam of energy at him, knocking him into the pile of golem bodies. If I hadn't blocked that with my spear, I would have been killed immediately. He looked down at the spear he was holding, which was shaking in his hands. It was slowly disappearing. Now only a little energy remained. He stood up, walked forward, holding the spear in one hand at his side, his eyes returning to their fiery red hue. Russell's face was serious. If that's the case, he tightened his grip on the spear. His hand pulled the spear back behind him, preparing for another charge, shouting, "This is my final attack." The golem's mouth opened wide, seemingly retreating. As he launched his attack, he thought, "Please, All my efforts so far seem to have been a bet on this final strike. His eyes burned with determination as he shouted in his mind, "Strike it." The yellow firelight of the spear rushed toward the golem, piercing it. Then the spear disappeared, and all he could do was stand there and wait. The golem appeared faintly surrounded by white smoke and red flames. Russell stared at it, a large hole now torn through its chest. Finally, the golem was destroyed. With a tired expression, he said, his eyes nearly falling as his face seemed to be sinking. "I did it." His body collapsed onto the chaotic floor. The system displayed a notification, "You have completed the mission. You will now receive your reward. You will receive low-grade mana stones X2 and lowest level grade mana stone X3 as a reward. You will also receive as a reward Forgotten King's Horn." At that moment, the status display showed a message, "You have obtained as a reward." The red object chained up began to stir. As it fell, the chains snapped apart. The red object within ignited flames, erupting as if it wanted to burn everything. The status display showed Forgotten King's Hornfire's essence. Immediately, the horn that had been burning emitted a blinding light enveloping the space. The young man, his face still marked with wounds and blood smeared across his face, lay unconscious. The status display read, "Entering the Forgotten King's thoughts in order to receive reward." After the system's notification, he slowly opened his eyes, exhausted, his face covered in blood, his gaze showing a hollow weariness. Both of his arms were chained up in midair by glowing golden chains. He tried to steady himself and figure out where he was. The status display kept showing, "You have obtained the reward. Forgotten King's Hornfire's essence is entering the Forgotten Kings in order to receive the reward." He asked in confusion, "Isn't the horn of the Forgotten King the horn of the fire dragon?" His arms were tightly bound, but he continued speaking. "But is this really the reward? It feels like I'm being tortured." A sinister, threatening voice echoed, "If you can endure the trial of fire and reach the thoughts of a sublime being." He was in too much pain to speak, his face dripping with sweat, his expression one of shock, his mind racing. "Are these just the remnants of thoughts? I feel like my head is about to split open." Then that voice echoed again, "I grant you a fragment of the king." Immediately, the red horn still burning advanced toward him, causing him to jump back in shock. The sharp end of the horn aimed directly at him, attacking. Bound by the chains, he couldn't do anything but scream in confusion. What? The next moment, the horn stabbed deep into his stomach with a forceful blow. The pain was so intense that he opened his mouth to scream. His body was in such agony that his eyes bulged as if there was no greater pain he could feel. The horn continued to pierce deeper into his stomach, even as it burned with raging flames. His whole body exploded with power, and a fiery light enveloped him, even his eyes shining with intense light. He screamed in agony, but against that pain, the voice echoed, "Use this power." His body was filled with strength erupting in a blinding light. He continued to scream in pain, the light surrounding him as it illuminated the entire space. Behind the light, a dark dragon appeared, gazing at him. Overcoming the pain, the sky brightened, the ocean waves crashing in the refreshing air. He lay sprawled on the sandy shore. When he awoke, he smelled the salty sea air, looking around in surprise. He stood up, wiped the dirt from his face, and thought to himself, Where am I?" He looked toward the distance and saw buildings with blue rooftops that matched the surroundings. Is this Maldiva? He brushed his hair and wondered what happened here. The status display kept showing messages. "You have absorbed the Horn of the Forgotten King and reached the limit. The mana capacity you can absorb has exceeded its limit, unlocking a new potential. Your intermediate understanding of the fire element has reached its limit and will become advanced knowledge of the fire element." He read through the messages seriously, then clenched his fists. A massive amount of red mana surrounded him. He looked at the red energy, thinking, "Is this my mana? I'm almost at level 4 magic now." He sighed in relief and said, "Compared to what I went through, this reward is top-notch." Suddenly, a voice caught his attention. "Nice to meet you here, Russell," said a middle-aged woman with platinum hair. He saw her and immediately spoke, Lady Daria Snow White. They were standing near a drink stand, and she spoke first. "I sensed a sudden surge of mana, so I came here to check." She handed him a drink and noticed him. He smiled and said, "Thank you. I didn't expect to run into you here." "The Tower Mistress," She gave him a sharp, evaluating look. This boy almost reached level 4 magic in such a short time. She continued analyzing his mana is even purer. He's basically a genius. He set the drink down and asked, "So what brought you to Maldiva Tower, mistress?" She looked toward the sea and the tall buildings and replied, "Not many people know, but this is my hometown." He was surprised and asked, "Your hometown?" She answered, "Yes, that's why I come back here every summer. But Russell, what brought you here?" He looked at her and thought that it was too soon to tell her the truth. He scratched his head, then placed his hand on his chest, saying, "I came here to learn more about the world." She replied, "Oh, I see." But in her mind she thought, "Should I test this boy's abilities?" She handed him the drink and said, "Do you mind helping me with something?" He was confused. "Huh." She snapped her fingers and fire particles surrounded him. His body was enveloped in flames and he was a bit startled. Then an emblem appeared on his cloak. He looked at it thinking it was the emblem of the fire tower. She continued sipping her drink with a smile and said, "Don't worry, it's something you can handle." The status display showed, "The mission is Daria Snow White's test. Help her fight off the human trafficking ship pirates at Maldiva Harbor and pass her test. The reward for completion is intermediate, grade mana stone." He was a bit surprised after reading the message. Pirates on the ship, some people were talking. She said to him, "I guess you've figured it out already, but Andy forbids slavery." At that moment, there were people locked up in the prison with soldiers guarding them. "That's why we don't allow human trafficking ships to dock at our port." On the ship, the traffickers were unloading goods, she continued, "but unfortunately, some ships have come close to our port to dock. Some even tried to anchor near Maldiva. The two of them were now on a mana-powered boat. She clarified everything to him. "Of course, I could handle this myself," she said, her tone a bit more serious now. "But the purpose of this plan is to rescue the victims and seize the ship. It needs a detailed plan." He responded, "So we need to lure them into an attack." She praised him. "You caught on quickly." He was deep in thought, looking at the large ship not far away, thinking, if the tower mistress asks for help, hundreds of mages will rush in even barefoot. She had already used mana to target the ship ahead. He continued to think, analyzing the way she specially asked him for help. This was definitely a test. The boat was nearing the ship. She called out to Russell, and then turned to give him some final instructions. "What happens from now on might be too much for you." She spoke seriously, but the path of a guardian is not always smooth and glorious. He listened carefully to her words. She turned back, smiled, and said, "This is just another fate for us mages." Then she stepped onto the boat's railing, jumped onto the ship and called back to him, "Now I will attract their attention and you will go save the people." She darted away to follow the plan that had been set between them. He seriously considered the words she had just spoken, the path of a bodyguard. She flew up high above the ship looking down, and then grinned with satisfaction holding her staff. "All right, time to cast right here," she said. Then she emitted a powerful flow of mana from her body, her eyes glowing as she cast a spell. In the next moment, the sky around the ship blazed with a blinding light. She stood in mid-air, controlling the mana while shouting down at him, "Go ahead, kid.